Hey, welcome to the Buck Brief. David Harsanyi back with us now. He is a senior columnist at the Washington Examiner. He's also, you got a book coming out, don't you, David, soon? Like the conspiracy book.
Yeah, the Rise of Blue Anon. It's still a bit away, November, but yeah, coming up.
Yeah, I mean, that's coming up. We'll talk about that, but very exciting. All right,
Yeah,
let's
I expect a lot of that to happen after the election. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, let's dive right into that. I can't say this enough. To me, it was apparent that Kamala Harris was losing ground in recent weeks because the strategy of hide her from the public was too just sort of dishonest and gross for it to work in any meaningful way. And now I look at it and I say, but the strategy of having her speak in public is also not a good strategy, David. What is going on? All this media all of a sudden.
What's terrible about it for her, I think, is that everyone with a brain knows that these are softball interviews, and she can't even answer questions in that capacity. You know what I mean? Where they're just sort of giving her questions that she knows she's going to be asked. I mean, you know you're going to be asked about the economy and what you do differently. You know you're going to be asked about Israel and where you stand. And yet she just offers up these word salads, these platitudes. They make no sense. It's completely without any factual basis or any serious understanding of the issue she's talking about. I don't think she's a stupid person, though I don't know that she's particularly bright, but I feel like maybe she is just scared to answer a question. She just can't. She's scared, or she doesn't know, or she's forgotten what she believes. I don't know what it is.
It really does feel to me like she is such a weak candidate that if Donald Trump loses to her, and there are people who would say, well, Trump has some particular vulnerabilities, and we'll see. But if Donald Trump loses to her, it will be so demoralizing for Republicans, because if Kamala Harris, with a few months to campaign, can beat the Republican Party, to me it just means like their system, the whole thing, like the whole machinery that Democrats have, is just currently superior to whatever Republicans can put forward, because she is a uniquely lacking candidate at a national level.
Listen, I think there are people out there who just don't like Donald Trump, and that, it just is that way. Uh, and Democrats maybe have a better, I'm not an expert on issues of getting the vote out campaigns, in states, and maybe they're better prepared for this sort of thing. But the very idea, setting aside their personalities and the things we don't like about the candidates, the very idea that someone who is part of the administration going right now, who did what they did to our economy, who has left the world, aflame, is not losing this race by like a pretty big margin, just tells you that we're just very tribal about politics, probably, and that it doesn't even matter for a lot of people who's running. They're just going to vote party. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't see any other way to view this.
Yeah, well, to me, that just means that they could have any Democrat run and the outcome is roughly the same, right? It doesn't. They could just pick somebody out of the ranks of the Democrat elected officials, and you'd have a similar outcome. Because Kamala Harris, she's just not good at this. So, on the one hand, that's reassuring going into the election, but on the other hand, it's kind of terrifying, because if somebody, in my estimation, who's so lacking in the skill set for this is still able to win the presidency, that's pretty striking to me. It's funny, Clay asked me this on the radio show. I kind of took Kamala at her word that she owns a Glock, because I can't prove that she doesn't. So I don't like to say someone's lying unless I know they're lying. Clay's like, she's lying. He doesn't believe she owns a gun, just full on. He's like, I don't buy it. Where do you come down on that? And also just if she does own a gun, to me, that raises some questions about, well, then why have you taken some of the positions you have about other people owning guns?
Hey, I wouldn't be surprised if she was lying, but she was in law enforcement. Maybe it's along the way she was threatened. Who knows why she might have one? But I say this: so what? There are tons of authoritarians who have guns. They want guns. They want you to have guns.
Right.
That's what the authoritarian doesn't want. So to me, that she has a gun does not change my opinion, or nor should change anyone's opinion of her positions. One of her positions was that you can use an executive order to take guns away from Americans, and that is authoritarian. And I don't care how many guns she has or doesn't have. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if she was lying about it.
Yeah, I just feel like it's also interesting that she's And whether it's the gun issue, the border, now she's a border hawk. She even said she wanted to build a wall, or she would complete the wall recently. Everything about Kamala Harris that we knew in public life until July of 2024, we're supposed to just forget. It's truly like amazing. It's like a Soviet rewriting of the history of the last 10 years of this person, and no one's allowed to notice that that's what's going on. That is exactly what is going on.
It's mind-boggling. I would say, historically speaking, there is no other presidential candidate who's changed their, can't even say she changed her mind, that's flipped positions on so many major issues. And here's the thing, I don't even buy that she flipped. I would not accept that she flipped an issue. If I flip on something, I change my mind as a columnist, and I'm a nobody, I explain why. If you don't explain why you took the original position, if you don't explain your evolution to the new position, then there's no reason for me to accept that anything's changed or that you take real positions. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
just because she says she has a new position, or a spokesperson says she took a new position, doesn't really, that should be accepted by anyone in the media. But of course, most of them do.
We were talking about guns a second ago. Reminds me, our sponsor, Bear Creek Arsenal. There's a lot to choose from in firearms out there, but if you want to add to your collection with a high quality, really well made and very accurate firearm, whether it's a handgun, a rifle, Bear Creek Arsenal's a name you've got to know. Bear Creek Arsenal is one of the newer firearm companies around, but they're all American, based here in North Carolina. I've been to their facility, and they've also got a phenomenal selection of uppers for your rifle. So if you want to change out your upper receivers, you have more calibers at your disposal while still using the same basic AR platform. Bear Creek Arsenal, the best uppers, the best prices, 30-day, no questions asked return policy, in addition to their incredible lifetime warranty. Go to bearcreekarsenal.com. They have limited time sales going on right now. Don't wait and miss out. That's bearcreekarsenal.com. Use my name, Buck, for 10% off your first order at bearcreekarsenal.com. Exclusions apply. I want to get back into the political stuff. Well, this actually ties into the political stuff, but the sort of switching into, it was the October 7th 1-year anniversary yesterday, and the marches that I'm seeing on the street of these are Americans, right? It's one thing when you see crazy things happening in like Middle East or Arab or Muslim countries, and you're just like, well, we know how they feel about the Jews and about Israel, so this is not surprising. I mean, it doesn't excuse it, but it's just. But when you see Americans doing this, like, what is the thought process here for people marching with Palestinian flags on October 7th? Like, what do they think they're accomplishing? What is the moral positioning they think they have? Because I mean, I truly watch this. I had friends sending me videos of this from New York, from their office windows and stuff. It's like, these people just seem insane to me. Like, this seems like there's actually something wrong with them.
I wish I had a good answer for it. I mean, it's something that's been going on for thousands of years. I don't think it's changed. In fact, I would say, though, in modern times, there has been, from the time of Karl Marx, not to get too deep into the weeds, there's been a connection between Islamists and Marxists, the Palestinian cause, and the hard left. And now it's just come together in a way where I feel like people feel like they have permission to be anti-Semitic because they just blame it on Israel, this and that. They're wearing terrorist headbands. They're flying Hezbollah flags and Hamas flags. They justify the killing. And you say there are crazy people out there and they seem insane. They sure do. But there are also a lot of people in Ivy League universities, in the State Department, in politics that agree with them. There are best-selling authors like Ta-Nehisi Coates who agrees with them.
Can we dive into that? Actually,
millions of people buy.
I was going to say that was the next thing I want to ask you about. So I want to just take that on right now. I watched that interview. I'd never heard of the CBS, and for those who haven't seen it, I would recommend you go and watch it. It's like a 7-minute long interview. You can see it on YouTube or wherever. And Ta-Nehisi, is it Ta-Nehisi Coates?
Ta-Nehisi Coates, yeah.
He's one of these guys who, particularly among the white liberals that I know, they were like, this guy is like the new messiah of literature. I don't know, maybe 6 years ago or something, when he came out with this book that's basically a screed against white racism, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, this is amazing. I read a couple. I will tell you, I was in a coffee store and they were selling a lot of these kinds of books. They had like a reading rack, and I read a few pages of it. I didn't really think it. I was like, you got to be kidding me, right? Anyway, put that aside for a second. That's not surprising that particularly white liberals find this this style of literature or this style of writing fascinating. The guy knows nothing about the Middle East. I mean, he's truly an ignoramus about the Arab-Israeli conflict, about Middle East political dynamics, about the history. But he went there. And now he's writing a book about it. I mean, I've been there, and I wouldn't write a book about Israel-Palestine either. And he's asked some normal questions from a guy who clearly, look, I believe the anchor is Jewish. He's asking the questions, which has been pointed out by a lot of people, and then he brought a bias to it. David, CBS has come out and said it didn't meet editorial standards. They're saying you're not allowed to ask the famous black author who basically hates the state of Israel and says it's an apartheid state. I mean, that's if you say something's an apartheid state, you're morally condemning it in a very harsh way. And they're saying it doesn't meet their editorial standards. What is the editorial standard that you're not allowed to ask any questions? Like, make this make sense for me, or try to.
Well, the questions were the mildest questions. A question that anyone who writes a book on something like this or knows anything about this situation would easily be able to answer. Now, I read the book. I reviewed the book. For those who want to read it, I wrote a long review of it. Oh. Let me just tell you this. The whole book's not about Israel, though a large section of it is. First of all, it is not just anti-Israel. He is anti-Jewish, but he's a complete racist. He judges everyone by the color of their skin, which is the definition of racism. And that's what his whole philosophy is. And he can only see things through that prism. But let me tell you this. Imagine someone wrote a book explaining the Palestinian situation and the Israeli-Palestinian war and didn't mention the word Hamas once in the book. Yasser Arafat, not once in the book. Hezbollah, not once in the book. He uses the word terrorism once in the entire book, and the word that it's attached to is Zionist terrorists.
Oh my God.
He's talking about 1948. The book is a joke. He is a complete midwit. He is an ignoramus on this. He would never debate or stand up to a debate with anyone who would ask him a tough question. And that's why they need to coddle him and do this to a guy who asked him a very simple question. Why in your book did you don't even mention the Palestinians engaged in terrorism themselves or anything like that? So I can't imagine. I mean, I just wish I was able to interview him and just ask him a couple of questions, because I feel like he doesn't know anything. And the idea that he now has this best-selling book that millions of young people are reading. My kid had to read his book, not this one, obviously, but in high school, in just a book of racism against white people that tells you that your immutable characteristics, that your skin defines you, and that you're a racist. It's just mind-blowing to me. And I think he's a perfect sort of symbol for the kind of stupidity we're now engaged in instead of actual thinking. And just because he's a nice writer and he can turn a phrase doesn't make him a smart person. He is not a person who I think cares about facts, has done any kind of real research. It's just all emotional appeals. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I hate it. I don't know if it came through, but I hated this book, and I am not a fan.
Well, I mean, I'm so interested that you actually read it. I mean, I'm not sure that I have the stomach for it, so I appreciate that you did. I can say that in the interview, he looks like a moron. I mean, he just doesn't know anything. And the answer to how do you write a book about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and not mention Hamas and not mention terrorism, which is one of the things the CBS anchor brought up with him, and to just basically say, well, it's apartheid, and like that's the end of it. Apartheid is racist. They're racist. It's apartheid. End of story. You sit there and you're like, what is this guy?
By the way,
go ahead.
Factual errors in that book. There's a long list. I would say like 50 factual errors in that book about the Israeli situation. He spent 10 days there on a literary, festival or something like that. And so it's terrible in that sense. Now, I don't think he's a stupid person. I shouldn't say that. I do think he's an incurious person. I don't think he's actually curious about anything. He in that book says Jerusalem reminds me of Charleston, North Carolina, with the South Carolina, with the Confederate generals looking down at the poor Palestinians, in this case, the Jewish people. He doesn't even allow that Jews have any kind of connection, even though under his feet is archaeological digs that find Jewish remnants of Jewish civilization there going back 1,000 years before Muslims ever showed back, if not more. So he is just a fraud. And that's why you see this reaction. He cannot debate anyone. He will never have to debate anyone.
Right. Well, of course. We'll come back to this here in just a second. Our nation's operating system is experiencing more than their fair share of failure. A lot of people think so. Some of the top researchers at Stansberry Research definitely think so. Stansberry is a financial research firm that produces reports on the state of the nation's economy to try to get you positioned to benefit, to make money, to protect your wealth and your assets. They've recently put out this report about 911 call centers going offline, a plane almost falling apart mid-flight. One of the big reveals was the number of train accidents last year, some 4,700 in all. Learn why so many big accidents are now taking place in America and exactly where and when the next big accident is most likely to occur. Go online to americadisaster.com for the full story and hear the report explained to you. That's americadisaster.com to get the full story on America's next big accident and how to protect you, your family, and your money. CBS, though. Okay, it's one thing for Ta-Nehisi Coates to be a complete buffoon in the which was very apparent to anyone why. Clearly, it didn't go well for him because CBS is now, they're having like a struggle session officially. Have you seen this? Yeah. This actually just came out.
Yeah.
They need to have like a diversity educator come in and talk about, like a guy wrote a dumb book. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's really kind of delusional on the issue, can't answer questions. And now CBS is like, we need to have struggle sessions. What the hell is wrong with CBS? Like you would think that they would see this as, I don't know, journalism or just the basics of doing some kind of a news interview. Like, why are they doing this?
Well, I think it speaks to a larger problem, actually. Do you remember when Tom Cotton wrote that
op-ed New York Times about calling the National Guard? Yeah, sure.
Right. And there was a revolt of the staff, and they got the editorial board editor guy fired, and all of that. And a similar thing happened when Kevin Williamson began working at The Atlantic. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
There was a revolt, but yeah. So it's the same thing. There are a lot of editors. People don't realize it's not just like when you see a columnist or you see a biased report somewhere, but there are tons of editors, copy editors, other people, and they're younger people. And these younger people, they cannot take anyone disagreeing with them or saying things they don't like. And then they just want to shut down speech. It's the opposite of what journalism should be about. And I think this is just another case of that. I don't know if you saw Gayle King, who was another interviewer there. I don't know if she asked any questions. I don't think she did. Had given Ta-Nehisi Coates the questions she was going to ask before the interview, which is completely against any kind of journalistic ethic that anyone who's in the business, everyone knows that. So, but she won't be reprimanded. I'm sure this guy will be. I forgot his name.
Yeah, it's fun. I'd never heard of this guy before. I'll be honest with you, and I was like, oh wow, I got look at this guy over at CBS asking some questions, and it's interesting too because there was nothing unfair or even aggressive in any of the questions. He's just like, hey man, like you wrote about this, like you didn't even talk about the following, like just tell me why. And Ta-Nehisi Coates is like, because Israel's racist. That's basically it. I mean, there's no, and that's actually a better version of his answer than what he gave, right? He kind of, sputtered around, and he actually sounded like he got very nervous in the beginning of this, like, oh my God, they're asking me real questions about this. But I mean, I would know the other thing is, David, anybody with even like the vaguest, like real understanding of the Jewish Palestinian or Israeli Palestinian issues knows this is like you're stepping into it when you decide that you're picking a side on this, right? Like people feel very passionately about this. The idea that you could write a book where you're like, well, one side's totally wrong, and then everybody who sees it differently is just going to sit there and say, well, wow, you've been studying this for about 5 minutes, so like, sure, like just like let it rip. It's amazing. It's actually, I think it should get a lot more attention than it has. It's gotten a little bit of media attention, this whole thing, but the fact that CBS is having the struggle sessions and the people are like, oh my gosh, how could we even do this? I mean, can you imagine how infantilizing is it as well? This is supposed to be a leading American intellectual and author. I'm sure he's sold so many books. I mean, he's probably gotten all kinds of prizes for that. Between the World and Me book, right? All everything. Oh, showered him with praise. Brilliant guy. And he looked like on this issue, just looked like, as you said, a true ignoramus. And unwilling. It's one thing as well. Like there are pugnacious leftists who I think are really wrong, but like they'll get in there and they'll fight. They'll make their case, and that doesn't mean that I agree with them. But at least I'll give them the respect of they'll make the case. This guy, it felt like he didn't even it's like, what do you mean you're asking me any questions about this? I don't know. It's like he's operating in an alternate universe on this.
It reminds me a little bit of politics in the sense of like Tim Walz or even Kamala Harris. They're never asked tough questions. So when they're actually asked a question, they don't know how to react. And I think that Ta-Nehisi Coates has been glorified by, a white progressive,
Mm-hmm.
upper class progressive. Those are the people who buy his books, by the way. And, so when he's actually asked something, the guy was so polite. He asked him a question about his book. I mean, I don't, it's unfathomable to me that people don't know how to debate anymore. Now, I'm not saying, if I write something and I believe it, you can ask me any question you want on that topic, not because I'm great or anything, because I've thought about it and I'm ready to answer those questions. If you're not, I just don't understand how you can be a writer or a pundit or an intellectual. I mean, that's the point of it. We're supposed to be arguing about these things. And I don't think he can. Not many of them can because they're on the wrong side, frankly. They're on the side of Hamas, and that's a bad place to be,
Well,
I
let's
think.
get
An
into this
immoral
and
place to
bring it
be.
back to. I
Yeah.
want to bring it back to the election and Michigan and Kamala and the decisions that were made here, because to me, well, we'll get there in a second. Every 26 seconds on average, another violent crime takes place in the United States. Rising crime rates can threaten families. That's why the Sabre projectile pepper launcher should be your first choice of protection in a non-lethal format. It's the only 68 caliber launcher with a 7 projectile capacity, offering up to 40% more shots than other brands for superior home defense. For nearly 50 years, Sabre has been dedicated to making the world safer. Trusted by law enforcement and millions of families, Sabre provides powerful, non-lethal protection both at home and on the go. For extra peace of mind, Sabre's pepper sprays are ideal for on-the-go safety. Sabre's door bars block up to 650 pounds of force to keep intruders out. Visit saberradio.com. That's SABRE radio, saberradio.com, or call 844-824-SAFE. That's saberradio.com or call 844-824-SAFE. I train with one of these pepper launchers. Once you see how effective they are, I think you'll really want to have one in your home defense repertoire. David, they didn't pick Shapiro, and we were more or less told this story that it was because Kamala really liked Walz, but everybody was kind of like, you really need to win Pennsylvania, not Minnesota. And Shapiro seemed like an obvious pick. And you have a problem right now in Michigan because this is another thing. There's some bigotries that exist in the Democrat world on the left that everyone just kind of accepts. Like, there may be a certain demographic that has very regressive views on gays, for example, within the Democrat Party that nobody ever talks about it. I mean, it's very interesting. There certain groups are allowed to have certain views, and it seems like the Democrat Muslim voters of Dearborn, Michigan, and the surrounding area are like allowed to just really not like Jews, and that's okay. And am I missing something? Because it seems to me like
No.
they're trying to they're just trying to pander to them and say, oh yeah, sure, we'll stay. We don't want to have too much Jewish stuff going on here in the Democrat Party in this election, Michigan voters.
I mean, they're trying to have it both ways. Yeah, first of all, yes. There's no rational reason any political person would pick Tim Walz, who's terrible, who's been caught lying about everything from how his children were conceived to his military service, over Shapiro, who you might not like or whatever, but he's sort of carved out a centrist governance in Pennsylvania, and he's somewhat popular. So if you want to win that Pennsylvania, but they're nervous about Michigan, and there is open anti-Semitism there, and they are trying to placate and mollify those people. There's no way around it. Just every time she talks, this is why she can't answer. I don't know if you saw that 60 Minutes answer on Israel. It was just a word.
Yes. Yeah.
So the reason she can't answer that question is because she doesn't want to lose the votes in Michigan, but she also has to worry about Jewish voters to some extent. I mean, listen, a lot of Jewish people are in red states and areas she's not going to lose, but there's Pennsylvania, there's Florida, there's other places. And she's just, all over the place. So I think this administration has been the worst for Israel of any in history. I think any Jewish person who sees what's going on in the Democratic Party, where's Chuck Schumer? You just talked about all these Hamas marches in New York. Chuck Schumer, has he said a word about them? No,
Yeah.
They're scared to offend people who hate Jews. And, the trajectory of anti-Semitism is the same. And we're seeing it. Last year, it was some rationalization for this. Now there's just open celebration of October 7th all over the country. And all the things that you advertise, the pepper gun, the AR-15s, as Jews should be buying those things because
Mm-hmm.
in this country, thank God, you can defend yourself. And we're not going to go through the same thing we did in Europe here. And because of Israel's existence, there's not going to happen again. And, that's all I can say. I don't want to sound too
No, well,
idealistic about this thing, but it is what it is.
did you see the New York Times even had a piece? I watch Morning Joe every morning. I don't think I've ever told you before. Oh yeah. I mean, I watch it on like high speed or whatever. I watch it kind of after an hour has passed, so I can skip the totally. But I want to know I kind of want to know what the enemy's thinking. I mean, that's how I view it, and it is.
Sure.
It gets me fired up for my radio show too because I'm just like, these people are so dumb, and they like Joe Scarborough is such a fraud, and Mika, they are such elitist frauds. The whole thing is a put on. Like, people can like me or not like me. I sound exactly the same about all of this stuff, whether I'm just hanging out with friends or, with my wife and walking around and talking to people as I do on the radio. I mean, Joe Scarborough, the whole thing is a put on. But anyway, wait, I just got so fired up about this. I lost my train of thought. Where were we a second ago?
Was it about the 60 Minutes interview?
No, New York Times. New York Times put out this piece where they're saying, there's the Muslim support for Kamala has like evaporated in Michigan. And I mean, one, it's because they don't like Jews and they don't like Israel. That's what's going on. But I also always want to ask some of these voters that they talk to for this New York Times piece, like, what do you want America to do here exactly? Like, but do you know what I mean? Like, what? There's a whole other question too of like, what does Hamas even want? The people that are saying like, oh, like Hamas is a resistance organization. We can put that aside for a second because you and I know what they want, but I'm just saying they'll never answer that question. But what are the Muslim voters of Dearborn? By the way, there are Muslims who are going to vote for Trump and who are not, in this category, to be very clear, in Michigan and elsewhere. But those who are like hate Israel and therefore are angry at the Biden administration, I would sit here, I'm like, what do they think? Like, what does a good president do in the circumstances? What do they think? Do you have any idea on that? I honestly have no idea. Just rhetoric?
I don't think they'd be happy until I just don't think they'd be happy until they were carpet bombing Tel Aviv or something. Americans, I mean, that's what would make them happy. I guess they want the United States to stop aiding and selling weapons to Israel. Just like, for instance, when the Squad and other Democrats voted against defensive weapons for Israel, which actually saved lives in the long run. But I don't know what they want to, I mean, it's getting to the point where at some point in the Democratic Party, and it's not all Muslims, but many Muslim voters are going to be, and those Muslim voters are going to be more important than Jewish voters, especially since a lot of the Jewish community, as it were, of course, have abandoned Judaism. They don't care about Israel. They're only Jews in name only, I guess you'd say. And, subscribe to these far left appropriations of Judaism, approximations of Judaism. They're not really, they don't care about Judaism or Jews anymore. And that's the sad truth of it. And those people will sometimes even be marching out there with the people who want to see Israel destroyed. So,
yeah, there are. I mean, this is
point.
Another fascinating part of this. I mean, there are Jews who are out there marching with the pro-Hamas people in the streets. That is a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're Jews like Trotsky was Jewish. They're socialists. They've been taken over by some left-wing extremist views of the world. And they're not critical of Israel. I love when people say, oh, you can't be critical. Of course you can be critical. People are critical of Israel in Israel. It happens everywhere. But when you put on, when you're pro-Hamas, which believe, from the river to the sea and all of that stuff, and those are things that people are chanting, you're no longer a critic of Israel. You decided that this one country where Jews live doesn't deserve to exist. And everyone else does. They're not out there marching for Kurds. They're not marching against Chinese.
They're not marching. I've been telling everybody, you got mostly Arab Muslim militias in the South Sudan that are just raping and massacring right now black Africans by the thousands and thousands. No one even. I tell people this, they don't even know it's happening. Never mind, aren't focused on it. They have no idea.
There's all kinds of subjugation going on in the world. In Bangladesh, it happens everywhere, and they don't care. They are focused on this one country that, in my view, is sort of a bulwark of Western civilization there. And, by the way, has made peace with almost every Sunni Arab country. If it wasn't for Iran, which funds Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and Syria, there would be mostly be peace in the Middle East right now. But yet, what did Democrats do? What does Biden do? What did Obama do? They coddle Iran. They're pro-Iran in many ways, and they want to see a sort of balance there between Iran and Israel. But Iran is a theocratic regime. They're not a rational power. Why are they even attacking Israel? They have literally no geopolitical reason to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm all over the place, but the point is that if you're pro-Israel and you care about that a lot, I don't see how you can vote for a Democrat anymore. I just don't.
I
In fact,
ask my Jewish
if you
friends
care about
that
the
question.
Jewish people, I don't see it.
Yeah, I ask my Jewish friends that question all the time, and I got to tell you, I do not. I think you might see a 5%, maybe a 10% increase in the Jewish vote for Donald Trump. I don't think it's going to be bigger than that. Do you? Do you think
I've been
it'll be
hearing.
bigger?
I've been hearing this forever, and it never comes true. The Jewish vote, for many reasons, for traditional reasons, where Jewish people were in the urban areas where they congregated. Me, myself, I grew up in New York, and I hardly knew anyone who wasn't a Democrat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that maybe there'll be maybe fewer Jews will come out to vote for Democrats, but I don't think you're going to see a huge bump in the Trump numbers. And there are many, and there are many reasons you might not like Trump. That's fair. But that doesn't mean that you can ignore what's going on right now in the Democratic Party if you're Jewish. I just don't think you can.
Good moment to tell everybody about our sponsor here, International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. This is the 1-year anniversary of the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. As we know, 1 year ago this week, Hamas terrorists killed 1,200 Israelis, took 250 hostage. And a year later, we're both witnessing the conflict in Israel and continuing fighting against Hamas and trying to get the hostages freed. This conflict goes on day in and day out. Israel needs her allies at home and abroad to stand with her in this time. Since the war started, there have been reservists who have left their families to serve their country. Soldiers have been injured. Their families need your support. There's a lot that can be done. Your gift of $150 helps the fellowship provide food and other necessities to these families to help them survive. Thanks to generous fellowship supporters, your gift will be matched, doubling in impact. Call to make your $150 gift right now, 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-4325, or go online to supportifcj.org. That's one word, supportifcj.org. David Harsanyi of the Washington Examiner. We'll talk to you again soon about that book you got coming out. Thanks for your time today, man. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Good conversation.